Analytics with the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities, and I'm also a member of the Open Mind team, the UN Privacy Preserving Techniques Task Team, and the UN Pet Lab. I want to extend a warm welcome to everyone joining us today for the UN Pet Lab Open House. The Pet Lab was launched in January 2022 to bring together a community of practitioners in the field of pets who would experiment, learn, and share their insights with a focus on use cases for official statistics. Members of the UN Pet Lab meet weekly to work through the challenges of implementing pets in concrete use cases and projects that are relevant for the community of official statistics. I would like to introduce our colleague Andrew Trask to share an update on the latest work happening with the UN Pet Lab.
Thank you so much, Jess. The UN Pet Lab, as you know, has about just under a half dozen members, members representing a half dozen national statistics and international statistics offices. For the past 3 to 4 weeks, since the last time that we met in the open house, the primary focus of the UN Pet Lab has been one of surveying and discussing the various constraints and needs that are unique to the statistical community, particularly the needs that are new and the interests that are new. And those sort of new interests aligning with sort of some of the new opportunities that privacy and technologies have to offer. And the central theme, so what I thought I would do today is just give you sort of an early glimpse at the insights that have been gleaned about the statistics community and about their needs, about their hopes, to the extent that that is useful to you in your professional work and lives. So I think the central theme that we have discovered throughout this process is a renewed and growing interest in data stewardship. So, as you know, the purpose of the offices for official statistics is to provide official facts and figures to promote sort of policy and policy decisions within a country. And naturally, they end up becoming sort of stewards as surveys go out and data is collected by official statistics communities, and this provides insights that are sort of neutral from the perspective of different actors in society. However, this traditional model about surveying and aggregating data and then producing sort of data products is being questioned in terms of its scope, particularly the notion that privacy and technologies can sort of increase the ability here. So of frequently mentioned desires to expand beyond this sort of standard survey-based model is to increase the relevance of data, the timeliness of data, so how long it takes to get from when the data is collected to when it actually is produced an insight, the frequency of data. So for example, a decennial census, happening once every 10 years is not nearly as frequent. Sometimes there are annual surveys, but relative to, say, daily COVID statistics that a lot of national statistics community have been producing, this has created a sort of renewed interest in the value of being able to promote statistics happening at a much more rapid pace for use cases like this, and then the granularity of statistics. So often it can be difficult for, say, a official statistics office to understand what all the different types of questions are that people in society would need to be able to have answered to be able to drive sort of good outcomes that are beneficial to society quite generally. And so one of the interests is whether sort of new privacy and technologies can sort of increase the granularity of questions that can be asked over sensitive data that can't necessarily be released in its most granular form. So you could imagine national statistics offices releasing aggregate information that might not be answering or useful to answer particularly specific or nuanced questions that need to be answered. And so additional sort of interest of the national statistics community has been to increase sort of data literacy, so this data quality, safe access, and of course to mitigate privacy concerns with data protection, which is always a regular topic. And as a general theme, by way of sort of how privacy and technologies can facilitate this, is this notion that perhaps national statistics offices in their role will play a part in stewarding information within society that is beyond just the information that is necessarily in their own databases, right? That there actually might be a role of them providing advice and guidance to other government agencies, that they could provide sort of infrastructure and support to connect different, say, for example, in the context of federated learning or federated data networks, to connect sort of parties with data with people that need to answer questions, and be able to provide kind of that governance and legal accountability and oversight to this type of national or regional infrastructure, without necessarily it being a sort of a formal data product. And lastly, I think there's this interest that PETs could allow for more flexible data products. So as opposed to a statistical office thinking ahead of time, this is the question that people will want to answer, so we're going to produce a product that answers this type of question, to instead have a more flexible, privacy-enhancing technology-enabled infrastructure that allows people to come with their own questions and be able to answer these sort of novel questions on data that might be distributed throughout society without that having to have been thought of before by the statistics offices, and that possibly sort of privacy-enhancing technologies would allow statistics organizations to be able to steward this type of process, and ensure that it meets the values and the principles of the statistics community in this sort of more flexible and end user focused type way. So it's a very, very exciting time to be in the official statistics community. There's a lot of, I think, interest in seeing what, exploring how privacy-enhancing technologies can expand the degree to which statistics offices are able to be stewards of information throughout society. We will continue to investigate and report to this group the interests of the statistics community broadly, to the extent that is interesting to you. And of course, we welcome follow-up questions and comments from anyone in the group at any time. So, and especially if there's a particular question or insight you'd like to learn from the statistics community, we'd be more than happy to investigate that for you. Thank you. I suppose back to you, Jess.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'd now like to introduce my colleague, Ronald Jansen, who will be introducing our speakers today regarding the topic of the day, which is pets and official statistics.
Thank you, Jess, and thank you, Andrew, for yes, a very good introduction in this topic of how privacy-enhancing technologies could be important for the work, or are important for the work of national statistical offices. So we will have some national statistical offices introduce a little bit of their engagement with sensitive data, and we will have speakers from Ethiopia, from Brazil, Mexico, and from Canada. But before turning to our colleagues from the National Statistical Offices, I just like to emphasize the areas where statistical offices or the statistical system engages with sensitive data, and I would say we can distinguish sort of three broad areas where this happens. One is in the acquisition or access of data by a statistical office. This could be data from other government agencies where data are sensitive. There might be agreements there. It could be so administrative data, but could also be private sector data. And in what Andrew was just indicating, in the way the work of the statistical officers is expanding now beyond traditional kind of access to data sources like census or survey. So like to hear about how that is going currently in statistical offices. Secondly is about the sharing of data. So how are the arrangements now with the statistical office in relation to sharing data? And that could be with government agencies. It could be with international partners. So how is what are the possibilities there, and is that happening? And then thirdly, it is the making the data of this statistical office, the microdata, available to the outside, so available to researchers or to public in general. So I think some distinction in those three areas could be useful. So let me introduce our guests, our speakers. First, very happy that we have Abiraj Tariku. She is the Deputy Director General of the Ethiopian Statistics Service. Very happy that Abiraj is here and that she will introduce or speak about the work of her office. After Abiraj, we will have Augusto Fadel from the IBGE in Brazil. We have Irving Cabrera from the Mexican Statistical Office, INEGI, and we will have Abel De Silva from Statistics Canada. But first, we'll turn to Abiraj. Very happy that you're here. It's late in the afternoon, I think, in Ethiopia. Abiraj, please let us know a little bit about how ESS is working with sensitive data. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ronald. You hear me? Yeah, okay, so just as a background, in our country, we don't have as such specific act about Data Privacy Act, but there are different laws that relate to data privacy and security, starting from the Constitution, different criminal codes, civil code, and also the media proclamation. It talks about data privacy. And also as a country, we have also a digital strategy for the country Ethiopia, which is a broader document. It talks about how the country should use the digital system to modernize the services provided to the to the citizens. Coming to Ethiopian Statistics Service, we have a directive to establish procedures for accessing raw data, for providing raw data to users. So based on that directive, the raw data are provided to users only without possible identification of individuals, households, or establishments. So we anonymize the identifications when we share data. So we share data for government institutions, for research institutions, UN agencies, and for also students. We also share census data, but the census data is restricted from 1% to 10% to provide the census data. Coming to Ethiopian Statistics Service experience for getting data from the line ministries or from the sectors, we normally sign MOU with line ministries to get the data. For example, we have signed MOU with Customs Authority to get foreign trade data, that's export-import data. And we get that data by CD, by email, and also by flash. So that's how we get the data from the Customs Authority. Coming to some of the challenges, as it is obvious, data security is a challenge. We need to get data from different line ministries, but all the time what they raise is data security. And also when we share the data, we also have concern on the data security. The other one is like privacy. And the other challenges is the existing laws. For example, when we come to different ministries, they have their own law which restricts themselves to share the data. And the other one, and the most important one, is the IT infrastructure to share the data. That is a challenge. So next we are planning to have to be engaged more on this data sharing, so that to facilitate the usability of the data. The first plan is we have designed the NSDs, the 5-year statistics strategy, and to be implemented in the next 5 years. And in that, we have incorporated different activities which involve data sharing. One of the activities is like building business register, and the business register is already, the structure is already developed, but we are facing some challenges to get the data, and so data is required. And for that, a discussion is undergoing with like revenue authority to get the data. But as I said, they are also referring to their law and their act, which restricts themselves to provide the data. They are highly concerned about the privacy. So we're planning to have to design MOU to sign with the revenue and other line ministries like Ministry of Trade and so on. And one of the solutions which was proposed by IT experts is to use API, the application programming interface, to share the data. But we are not used how it works, what it is all about. We just got the recommendation to use the API as a data sharing protocol or data sharing mechanism. Even when we discussed with World Bank, we had designed one project, a huge project with World Bank, but finally we can't manage to sign it, and it's under progress. So API is proposed even in that project, in the NSOs and so on. The other plan is to share experience with other countries like the Statistics Norway. They have the better experience of administrative data sharing. So we have a project with them, and we are trying to share experience with them, and also to take some of line ministries to Norway, or to have virtual discussion to get idea how they share the data. And also the other one is to work closely with Geospatial Institute to get geospatial data. We have a Geospatial Institute in our country, and also recently we have also one satellite which is providing data. So we are also trying to work with them. And lastly, the other one which we plan is to discuss with Ethio Teleco, which is the owner of most of the telecom data, on possible collaboration for research. I discussed with them this morning if there is a possibility. They said they have as a country, we have the digital strategy for Ethiopia, and that explains how we can digitalize the data. So they are also thinking of using big data and sharing the data in that way. And the other one is to link with line ministries on the data storage, linking our website and so on. So these are the plans and the basic challenges that we have. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Aresh. That gives a very good overview of all the areas where you work with sensitive data. So thank you very much for that. I would like to ask everyone to keep track of their questions, because I would like to have the four speakers first present or make an intervention before we go to questions. So hold on to your. I made some notes myself, so hold on to your notes for questions to Abhiraj. So thank you very much, Abhiraj. I think it indicated very well all the areas where you are in communication on sensitive data, and where you have to find either legal or other means to ensure both security and privacy. Thank you. I'll move now to Augusto Fadel. He is with the National Statistical Office of Brazil. Augusto, if you could introduce a little bit how this works with sensitive data in your office, and maybe introduce also a little bit where in the organization you work. Augusto, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you, Ronald. Well, I work at the Methodology and Quality Department of the Survey Directorate. I'm a statistician there at the Brazilian NSO, as you said. And I'll try to share some of our experience dealing with sensitive data. As for dissemination, traditionally, we give access to data through secure access rooms or formal agreement. It may involve academic research projects, partnerships, cooperation agreement with public or private institutions. These alternatives can be very time-consuming and costly, as we all know. And therefore, we've been studying statistical disclosure control methods and are about to release our first dataset protected by an SDC approach. Regarding data acquisition, we access external data mainly through legal arrangements. And in addition to many agreements that we have had for a long time, the Brazilian government has recently undertaken a data integration or interoperability program, which promotes the exchange of data between government institutions to feed their systems so that citizens do not have to resubmit information that the government already has. It's the once only commitment. And of course, it relieves the citizen from responsible burden, reduce fraud, brings consistency, and a considerable economy. And despite being a recent initiative, it already has some valuable databases available or connected to that system. But its primary goal is to integrate government systems, not to produce official statistics. Of course, it's a powerful source for at least update NSO registers, but it's not much flexible yet, and PETS could make you do a fantastic contribution here. Unfortunately, some crucial data for our statistical production process are not available on that system. And we do not expect them to be in the short, medium term for several reasons. And for example,
Yes.
well, I will start to talk about the electronic invoice, I guess. That's it's a government data, in fact.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it's a huge repository of data that we don't have access. It would be very valuable to bring economy, granularity, timeliness for the statistical production process. Of course, it has been a strong demand, not only in Brazil, as Andrew Trask. Okay, well, moving on, we another crucial data we still do not have access. It's companies' revenue. Not addressing any methodological aspects, but very briefly, our economic surveys use the number of employees as auxiliary variable in the sample plan. It's the best proxy we have for company size. Yet we know it's not a strong assumption for some economic activities. For that application, we don't need to see any byte or digit of the data, right? Just run an algorithm on it. So we believe that an approach based on PETS could tackle that problem quite easily, maybe. Lastly, I'll talk about an experience with privately held data. IBGE participates in the mobile phone data testing and has some initiatives using this kind of data. Although only one mobile operator agreed to participate, we did a successful proof of concept for one of these initiatives. But we couldn't manage to have access to the data to evolve any further because the operator alleged privacy issues. The funny story is that all of the operators offered as an alternative to sell us the service, that is to deliver the statistics instead of sharing the data. There are likely commercial interests here, okay? But with PETS, perhaps we could reach a middle ground. It's an expectation. Well, that's all for me. Thank you for your time, for having me.
Thank you very much, Augusto.
Sorry about the connection issues.
Yeah, so I think we got all of the important parts of the information that you wanted to share. And again, to our participants here, please note down some questions. I have also some questions back to you, Augusto, but we do this after we have heard from Irving and Abel. So we'll turn to Irving Cabrera. He is from INEGI, Mexico. Irving, if you also could indicate a little bit where you work within INEGI, and then how you work with sensitive data, how INEGI works with sensitive data. Go ahead, Irving.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, and we can also see your presentation there. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Irving Cabrera. Hello, everyone, and I work for I'm a data scientist and data engineer at the research team at INEGIS. And today I want to talk with you about how we deal with sensitive data at INEGI. So first of all, what's INEGI? Well, INEGI is the National Institute for Statistics and Geography of Mexico. We have several tasks. We coordinate, collect, process, and debug some statistical and geographical data that could be from surveys, administrative records, census, and also, well, geographical information like satellite imagery and so on. We have some examples of experimental statistics where we have sensitive, privately held data. Like, for example, we have some agreements with the banking institutions when they share us micro-aggregated data. We don't have sadly, we don't have the records themselves, but it's really small. The aggregations is, I think, is at level of municipality, like state, municipality, and by separated by sex and by age group, and inside that we have like the deciles of the population. How is the usage of bank accounts and credit cards and points of sales. We have that kind of information that is shared right now, is shared with us from encrypted emails, but we're working on like a web app where you can access and transfer the data securely, and is to be stored in what we call a data vault, where just researchers have a limited access. And that data vault, it's inside of a data lake when we can store the files as a source of truth without any the data is just stored there, and it's not altered in any way, so it can be used as a source of truth. And right now, this is an experimental statistic. It's just used internally, and it's just shared through dashboards. The data is not shared on tables or anything, just to visualization. Right now, we're in that point, but we aim to make it publicly available. But we're studying the sensitivity of this information, since it's every month. Well, the data is really disaggregated, and the is published, or we receive new information every month, so we have to check some of those issues. Also, we have some experimental statistics with social network data, like the state of mind of Twitter users in Mexico, where we collect individual tweets, and each one of them is classified as a positive or negative tweet, and with that we can come with an index of positive tweets and negative tweets, and then this program is already public, and what we share is the aggregated data from I think at level of state, with this index and the how many tweets do we have per day, per week, per month, and this index of state of mind. Right now we are we work closely with the Federal Institute of Information Access and Data Protection. That is the authority about data protection, and we we work really close, and from that we have a set of laws, of norms. We come with training for the for all the researchers and everyone who holds sensitive information, like for example the general law of personal data protection. So we always have a legal framework to work with. Regarding how do we share microdata, one of them is completely public access on INEGI's webpage. Anyone can find access to microdata for most survey programs, and also this is like this. We shared in different file formats. And we also add some file descriptors and everything, so you can understand the how's the database conform, how are the tables and everything. Of course, this data is anonymized, so you cannot. Right now, we're running some trails of how this if we can re-identify people from this microdata that we believe that is anonymized, but if we cross it with information from several statistical programs, can we re-identify or be close to identify it, individuals? We're running some experiments in that regard, but we don't have results quite yet. Also, from information that is not publicly available, we have a microdata lab and remote processing that is available to public servers of institutions in the Mexican state, officials of international organizations and public statistical bodies, academic institution researchers, and students from higher level academic institutions. Uh, this this service is free, uh, except when we have to prepare some kind of information specially. And the way to to access this information, you have to submit a form that you need some kind of information, some kind of microdata, and why do you need it? What's the purpose, and what are you doing? And well, some communication back and forth, and you can access it in several places in Mexico City, also in Aguascalientes City. I think there's a new microdata lab uh, where you can be there. There are some computers, you can access the information, make it run your your programs or and work with the information, uh, and then but information cannot leave. Or also there's the option, if you cannot be in Mexico City, for example, you can opt for remote processing. Right now, the pets that we used, well, is as we said, was is pseudo anonymization. Um, we're running on trials of this is good enough to share all the microdata, and right now we are looking for the creation of the generation of synthetic data, and also differential privacy to share microdata with and make it even publicly available and much more richer microdata sets. So that would, for my part, that would be all. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Erwin, for making this presentation on very short notice. It gives a really good overview of things. And I do have questions, but I will wait for that after we hear from Abel. So thank you, Irving. Abel, same to you. If you you work for Statistics Canada, please indicate which part of Stats Canada you're working for, you're working with, and how you work with sensitive data. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you, Ronald. Yes, so I'm Abel de Silva. I am a senior methodologist at Statistics Canada. I work in the methodology branch in the International Collaboration and Methodology Innovation Center, ICMIC, and specifically in the Research and Innovation section. So like I said, as I'm a senior methodologist, I mostly work on the methodology part of the different PET technology involving record linkage, private set intersection. And I have to say that what I'm going to describe in terms of how we use, how we have access to data, sensitive data, or how we share sensitive data, this is my, these are my views, not those of my organization. Now, to begin, I want to say that at Statistics Canada, we have a privacy framework, and which is basically we have a chief privacy officer who is in charge of implementing that framework, and we also have a governance that comes with it as part of this framework based on the Statistics Act and the Privacy Act. Okay, so the Statistics Act is essentially the act that mandates gives basically describe the mandate of Statistics Canada, and it's a very strong act. And in a sense, it's so strong that we're not obliged to share the data that we have with other government department, and the data we have cannot be used for administrative purpose. So that's a very, very strong act. And we also have the Privacy Act that provides additional protection with respect to privacy. Now, there are also many links to online resources about providing detail about this act that I can share after this meeting as well. Now, in terms of data protection authorities in Canada, as far as Statistics Canada is concerned, at the federal level, we have the Office of the Privacy Commissioner and the Treasury Board Secretariat. And in terms of our relationship with these two organizations, as an organization, we have to conduct privacy impact assessment in terms of how we use the different data sources and keep the Privacy Commissioner and the Treasury Board up to date in terms of these PIAs. And we have to provide the completed PIAs to these two data protection authorities. Now, I'm going to talk now about the data that we acquire. Of course, it includes survey data, administrative data, and the list includes tax data, vital statistics, of course, transaction data. If we talk about privately held data, so we have transaction data like scanner data. There's also satellite data that is used in the context of our agricultural surveys. And this data, we have access to it through legal agreements and or MOUs, mostly. Yes, mostly. Now, in terms of the data, now there are two kinds of data that like banking data and cellular network data, which are really sensitive, at least in Canada. So in terms of banking data, few years ago, there was a pilot study by Statistics Canada to evaluate the potential use of banking data by the organization. So it was not in production, just in the context of pilot study. and that was not welcome. So one of the comments that was made was that, first of all, that the Canadian public had not been made aware that this pilot study was actually going to take place. And the second comment that came was that perhaps this data, as an organization, it might be interesting for us to look at pets as a way to more safely have access to this banking data. So, and that ties in with the question about, as an organization, where we have looked at pets and what is the potential motivation for us to look at pets. And now I also want to comment about access to mobile phone data. Again, that's another source of sensitive data. And the recent example came in the context of the COVID pandemic. And where not our agency, but some other government department, the Public Health Agency of Canada, had collected some mobile phone information in the context of health and in the the pandemic, and even that has been criticized by the privacy commissioner. So access to mobile phone data is again something that is sensitive, perceived as sensitive for the agency. So the agency is very, very careful about accessing this data. I'm going to talk now about, I talk about the access and now sharing the data. Of course, we publish aggregate statistics after applying statistical disclosure control methods, and we apply the standard methods, okay, cell suppression, rounding. We have not used so far differential privacy or any of the pets in production. And in terms of providing access to our microdata, of course, Statistics Canada provides PUMF, public use micro data files, including greater access to those PUMF through what we call the Data Liberation Initiative. We also provide access to our microdata through real-time remote access, where users can run queries on our data. And finally, for researchers at universities through research data centers, where the researchers have to sign some agreement before having access to the data and be vetted and their studies as well before having access to the data. And like I said, I have links to publicly available resources that give further detail about what I just talked about. And perhaps just in closing, I want to mention something about our IT infrastructure. Lately, we've been migrating to the cloud. We're actually in the midst of that. So that also brings additional challenges in terms of our data infrastructure. And I'm going to stop here.
Thank you, Abel. Yes, thank you for that overview. So a lot of information. I also see that we are moving in time. A lot of information from Abarash, Augusto, Irving, and Abel. And I think we want to get some questions from the participants. So I think on one hand, I think I have to ask if either the participants put questions in the chat, or if we can open up the microphones. Don't know what is easier, Catherine, if you can open the microphones quickly, or if you have to do that one by one. So just for those who, let me put it this way: those who want to ask a question, maybe you can raise your hand or put it in the chat. And I will start while you're doing that. I'll start with some general remarks on the information, the presentations that we heard. I think what I hear is, on one hand, in working with sensitive data, I think each of your offices have some way of questioning about how secure and how private your data are, right? So you have this conversation internally, and you have it with your privacy, data protection authorities. So in how far you can get your data available to others or shared with others, and in how far the privacy there is protected. So I think that kind of so my question to you is if you have had discussions internally about a review of the protection of the privacy, and if that would be a useful exercise, because we've been discussing this with the Pet Lab, if that would be one of the services that we could or tools that we could provide in getting your own a self-assessment or outside assessment of privacy of your data. So I guess it's currently just self-assessment, but would auditing be useful? So a question to each of you on that topic. And then I think I stop there and I ask if others have questions as well, either by raising your hand or putting something in the chat. I don't see it, or maybe I don't miss it for those who put things in the chat.
There is a question in the chat, Ronald. It was a question for Abarash, and the question was, can you explain why the business registry is considered a sensitive data problem? Depending on the legislative framework, in a few countries, for example, it is considered mandatory open data, not protected at all in the public interest, down to the names of the directors and their home address.
Very good. And I will reformulate that question, because I think what's behind the business register is revenue data, so tax information from the businesses. And I think that's where the sensitive issue is. Abarash, I will turn to you right now. If you could answer that question, and maybe in general, if it would be helpful for your office to get an assessment of the privacy of the data. Please go ahead, Abarash.
Okay, thank you. So for the first question about the business register, yes, for the business register, the main data is coming from the Revenue Authority. And as I said in my presentation, the main issue there is like the Revenue Authority Act restrict themselves to share individual personal or business data. So that's what they are referring to. And now we are discussing if there is a possibility of sharing, maintaining the privacy and also sharing the data if there is a possibility. So that's the main problem. Actually, I think in developed countries that may not be an issue, but in our country that is why it's happening. But basically, as you know, but the business register is very useful. We are planning to use it as a frame for other surveys. We are planning to produce summary report on some indicators. Coming to the second question about if there is a plan for review of protection of privacy, yes, as I said, in our 5-year strategic plan in NSOs, we have a plan if there is a possibility of using more secured way of data sharing and evaluating the way to improve that. So we are planning to test if there is a secure way of sharing data. And I hope we will get some idea from this PET. So we have a project with Data for Now project with UNSD. We are also working, as I said, Statistics Norway, and also there is a project 50 by 2030 project, which is related to agriculture. So we want to test this with these projects. Yeah.
Thank you, Abarash. Thank you for that answer. I will move to Augusto. So on the question of self-assessment of how secure and how you protect privacy, you mentioned early on, Augusto, that you do have access control on microdata, and is that access control? Do you consider that as a form of pets? So questions to you. Please go ahead.
No, in fact, what we do about microdata is that or we have data sets freely available at our website, or we have them available on a server where you can't access remotely. You need to go there, physically go there and work inside that facility, do your analysis. It goes after that for a team to review it if it has any privacy issue. And only after that, the researcher or interested person will receive the results. So the only experience we have that I will not put in the pets basket is very simply the survey data set that we applied methods like global encoding, local suppression, things like that, non-perturbative privacy methods. And that's the only experience that we are in production. We have in production now. We are studying other approaches, but what we have concrete is that for now.
Thank you. Yeah, I think broadly you will probably would include it under the very broad scope of privacy enhancing measures, if you like, and so privacy enhancing technologies might be more specific, but I think it all fits in the same broad category. But thank you for this, Augusto. Irving, to you. I was intrigued by the data fault that you early on also indicated. And if the data fault in a sense is a kind of privacy protection, and if you can say something about that, and then in general about how INEGI does its own self-assessment of privacy protection.
Well, do you mean the data fault about banking institutions, or
Yes, the data fault of banking institutions that you mentioned, the data fault within the data lake, is that do you protect this with technology, or how do you have to see that?
Yes, well, we have several layers of protection for that information. It comes from the very beginning of firewalls and all this hardware equipment that is protected in an internal network. This data lake is only accessed on the internal in his network, or through, well, of course, through VPNs. And after that, this data lake normally is only access to secure user and passcode, and not everyone has the same access. So some users can have some access. Right now we have this data lake and the format of an S3 protocol. So like Amazon's, but we're using open source open source software that is Minio. And for that, well, that give us a lot of security and flexibility, because you can have your users can access and some kind of access. So some people can just only see that the files are there, but they cannot download it, they cannot upload it, or they can delete it, they can do everything. So all those sort of stuff that can be really fine-grained, uh, mm, tuned to the specific needs of each program. In that regard, well, we have all those kinds of security measures. Also, the the servers themselves, that they have to be the data is stored in a NAS. that is also can be only be accessed by certain pre-specified IPs. So that there's a multi-layer approach that to try to reduce the surface of attack to this data lake and this data vault.
Thank you. Thank you, Irvin, for that. Yeah, so I hear you. So there is a combination of data security in general, right? So protecting it from attack from outside, and then measures inside to make sure that privacy is protected for those who are using it. So thank you for that. I'll quickly turn to Abel. We're running a little bit out of time. Abel, thank you for putting the Stats Canada's Trust Center reference in the chat, and we'll have a close look at that. Maybe also the specific question to you, Abdel, is that how does Stats Canada self-assess that privacy is properly protected? If you can say something about that. Right.
Yes, and first I have to say that I am not in the IT department. I think they can certainly provide many more details about how they do it. But what I can say is Statistics Canada conducts privacy impact assessment, as I mentioned, and that's a requirement by the Office of the Privacy Commissioner and the Treasury Board Secretary. They're very serious about it, and the Office of the Chief Privacy Officer is in regular contact with these two data protection authorities to report on the progress of those PIAs. So that will be my first answer. And then on the IT infrastructure, I know that we have very competent members in our IT groups. They conduct all kinds of tests. Just as an example, because I'm in the research where we try to evaluate new methodologies and try to experiment with different software, including open source in R and Python. It's really not easy to get approval to run these packages sometimes. Lately, it has been facilitated, but they conduct really rigorous tests in terms of the vulnerabilities that comes with these packages. So just to illustrate how thorough they are in terms of assessing threats, in terms of our IT infrastructure. And the last thing I'm going to say is now the recent change has been moving to the cloud infrastructure. We're in the midst of that, and again, here also extreme care is exercised. And I also want to mention how we deal with personal information internally. Basically, information that could be used alone or in combination to identify a person in some of our data holdings internally. Okay, so we have to identify as soon as possible within our organization, and we're directed not to use these identifiers. Basically, we operate on a need-to-know basis. So if we don't have to do it, we don't have to use them, we don't. Okay, and there's recently been a push to make sure that really we don't duplicate files, that these identifiers are kept in a really secure environment and accessed by only a very small number of persons. And that we assign what we call a unique identifier, which would be some meaningless number, even for internal processing. Now, that is not without challenges, because when you need to do a linkage, these identifiers may be needed for the linkages, and because the linkage activities are distributed across the organization, done by different people, so they've been used to doing their linkage themselves. So it is a negotiation to kind of transfer that linkage ability to a small group, and then we use the linkage for different analytical studies which have different requirements in terms of the quality of the linked data. So that's one of the challenges that is still being discussed. But definitely the goal is to make it as secure as we can, even if it might come with an impact in terms of our internal processing. So I'm going to stop here regarding that question.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I mean, there are many more questions but I think I also have to give back the word to Jess for maybe final remark. And yes, I mean, this is a continuing conversation, and I think there are a lot more issues that we can solve going forward. Just to you, thank you, and thanks again, Abiraj, Augusto, Abel, and Irving. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Yes, so we would like to conclude with our appreciation to all of our speakers today and all of you who joined us today for the UN Pet Lab Open House. Please join the UN Pet Lab Slack channel, which is posted in the chat, to continue the conversation. And we look forward to seeing you again at our next monthly open house. Our open house events are posted on the UN Big Data webpage, where you're also able to view the past events. So thank you again for joining, and we'll see you in the Slack community until our next meeting.
Thank you. Goodbye to everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.